Welcome, everyone. My name is Max Medina, and this is Architecture for the Soul. Today, we have a very special guest. His name is Olly Thomas. Olly Thomas basically is a British architect, currently working as a senior designer technology specialist at Bjarke Ingels Group. Oliver is also co-founder of Pixel, an architectural think tank rethinking a sustainable future via the built environment, and also Architect Network, that is an online platform that aims to foster collaborations, discussing and education resources around the intersection of architecture and technology. Olly, welcome to the show.
Hey, Max, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate the invite.
Of course, today we're going to talk about technology, we're going to talk about architecture, and we're going to talk about all this cool experience of being in big architects. Hey, Olly, I would like to know from the beginning, when did you find out that architecture was a career for you, and how was your childhood?
Yeah, so to go right back to the beginning, I think it was one thing that I was super lucky in that I kind of figured out that I wanted to be an architect from a pretty young age. I've always had this, I don't know if it's like a good thing or a bad thing, is I do well at the things I'm interested in, and I'm not so great at the stuff I'm not interested in. So at school, I was like really bad at some stuff, but really good at other stuff. And I really gravitated towards, in the UK, we call it DT, design technology. Weirdly enough, that's now my title. I'm a design technology specialist. So maybe I've come full circle, but I always loved that. And for a little bit, I was kind of like flirting with the idea of becoming a car designer. I was like, oh man, that'll be so cool. But then I was like, I just could not draw cars at all. And so then I found out a little bit more about architecture. I think through, my mom was an art and design technology teacher. So she would like take me to galleries and things like that. And I remember getting fascinated by like the little models. They had like some architecture models and things like that. So from a very early age, I think early teens, I was kind of like, all right, I think this architecture thing's for me. And then I've just never really looked back. I've never really thought of anything else that I would really want to do. And I went through school, and then I kind of, did, in the UK, you can kind of choose your A levels towards the end. So I did A levels, which I thought was going to be great for architecture, like design technology, and went on to go and study architecture and went through university. And that was the kind of early phase. And I think I still look back, and I think that was quite lucky. A lot of my friends, didn't know what they want to do for ages. Even when they were at university, they were kind of like just studying something and don't really know where this is going, but I better get a degree kind of thing.
I feel very empathized with you, because when I was at the school, I was pretty bad in, well, I know I was not pretty bad actually. Now that I remember, I was good in school. However, I was not interested in anything. And when I started architecture, I find that the architecture was the best thing in the world, basically, because for me, it's like something intangible that is like an idea you can convert it into reality. And that was the world for me. It's like, what the hell, you can do this?
I think there is something intrinsically human about creating and building things. I think when you think about it, that's maybe what makes humans unique, is that I guess you could argue that like beavers make a dam or something like that, but like humans, we create things, we make airplanes, we make skyscrapers and things like that. So there's definitely something very intrinsically human about building things, and also about architecture. Like, when you say to people you're an architect, I've never heard someone be like, oh my God, that must be boring. Or like people always like, oh, that is so cool, I wish I did architecture or something like that.
Yes,
So
for sure.
I think, and you could be making something else, but I think the act of making and building things, there's something in that that's very rewarding.
Yeah, probably there is something very inside of our human nature that we love to build things.
Exactly.
And talking about cool things, how did you end up at Bjarke Ingels Group? And how do you, because
Yeah.
you worked in different companies before Big, and I would love to know more about your experience at Big and how it's worked with Bjarke.
Yeah. So, I even from university, I always really liked Big's work. I definitely applied a few times before I got in. So for anyone that's watching, it's not like just because you haven't got through an application doesn't mean you might not get one later on. And so I started off as a regular architect, like a design architect. I spent years, competitions, crazy deadlines, all that kind of stuff. At the time, I was working in Hong Kong, so it was very, very intense projects. And I really enjoyed that, and I still spend a lot of my time designing today. But I got to a point where I'm designing all these things. I'm using Grasshopper to design them, but if I'm honest, I don't really know how they're built. I'm making these things, but I don't quite know like the parameters of how they get built. And that's when I came across Front, who is like a facade consultant firm, but they have this computational specialism about them. And again, I'm not like a die-hard facade guy, but seemed super interesting. They were working with loads of really amazing architects, all the architects you could imagine, really interesting projects. And I thought this would be a great opportunity to learn how these amazing projects are built, but also using computational tools like Rhino and Grasshopper, et cetera, et cetera. So then I just followed my interest. I didn't kind of create a path that I would become this type of architect. I was like, okay, I think I've got this designing thing. I've got some experience designing. Let's go and find out how you actually build stuff with technology. Spent a few years working for Front, and I was lucky enough to work on some amazing projects like the World Trade Center with Rex Architects, their Performing Arts Center, the Seattle Space Needle refurbishment. Spent a lot of time working on Zaha's Morpheus Hotel and this
Oh, that's sick, man.
crazy
Actually, yesterday I was
having.
seeing the grasshopper sheet of that building is it's crazy.
Yeah,
It's
I mean
like two
the
pages.
Zaha scripts to create it is crazy, and then our scripts to detail it and make the BIM model of how it's going to be built was just like, it's not one script, it's like literally hundreds of scripts. But yeah, and then I was kind of, after a few years doing that, I felt like, I wanted to go back into the architecture world. I was kind of like solving a lot of different architects' problems, and I thought, oh, let's go and work for someone that I really connect with and really appreciate. And to be honest, at that point, I was still like, should I go back as a designer? Should I go as some kind of specialist? And I was interviewed at a few places, and a Big was definitely top of my list. And I went in, had an interview for both as an architect and as a specialist. And the specialist thing just seemed like it might be more of an opportunity. There seemed room to grow. And so, yeah, I initially joined as a BIM specialist. I joined the BIM team in New York, but the BIM manager at the time, the BIM director, Jan, was kind of super open about also utilizing other skill sets like computational design and kind of bringing that to the office a little bit. And since joining Big, it's been a great experience. I have a really unique position where I get to work with many teams at any one point. So BIM is still my bread and butter, like my kind of day-to-day stuff. I'm helping the teams out transition from the concept stage into schematic, where we come into Revit and things like that. So I'm working with teams on a day-to-day basis, one foot in the team, but then the other foot is outside of the team, and I'm helping out with early stage computational stuff, teaching Grasshopper, Revit, Rhino Inside, all these tools
That's amazing.
in the office. And I'm also testing out new technologies that I think will be useful in the office. Like right now, it's kind of been augmented reality, virtual reality, that kind of stuff, and seeing how that fits into the design process in Big. And so, yeah, it's been a great experience. It's coming up for 3 years since I joined the office, and yeah, it's an incredible environment to work in. It's the culture that big, and people like Biaka and Kai and the other partners
Did you
have
interact
really,
with Bjarke a lot?
to be honest, no. Biaka is the design partner. Of course, like when those worlds overlap, like there's some kind of design direction we want to convey through some kind of technology. We'll interact with him and the design teams, but there's Big is made up of a number of partners. Biaka is the design partner, and there's other partners that focus more on technology. But so yeah, Biaka is very much kind of driving every single project, like keeping the tabs on all the design teams. So it's occasional. It's not. There's other partners that we interact with more in the tech side.
And what do you personally is your opinion about Bjarke? I will tell you mine. For me, is the best architect of the world right now, and is basically a role model of how you can deal with architecture business in the world, because he for sale, this guy is absolutely amazing. He's like a machine of selling things and sharing ideas, and that I think that's a unique aspect of Biaka. Of course, his architecture and the way that he conceptualizes the ideas and to convert into reality, it's absolutely amazing. He is basically a leader that can move forward architecture into other levels. This is my opinion. What is
Yeah.
your opinion in your side? That you basically have more interaction with him?
No, I would definitely agree that he's the way I maybe describe him is like he is the inspirer of the office. Like when he comes to the New York office, and he often give a presentation about either a project or whatever is on his mind at any time, you come away from those meetings just like so so inspired to work on whatever you're working, or like what's coming down the pipeline and that kind of stuff. So he is really that kind of the inspiration, the vision, the driver behind, which is super important. I think I've talked about this before, but it's like a company is really just you gathering a group of people around a shared vision, right? And the better, the more successful you are at communicating that and inspiring people to come work for you, the more, like, the better the talent is that comes to join you, right? And I think that's a huge part of that's one of the many things that Biaka has created. And it's also not only Biaka, like Kai is also, when you start working at a big, especially in the New York office, Kai is a huge character in creating that culture as well. And he's amazing to work with as well. And through that, you then create this culture and this group of people where everyone is like, I think everyone that I work with is super interesting. I find them, very inspiring from all levels, from interns to senior architects to partners. And that's why there's also this talk about being a bigster. When you join big, you become a bigster, and which sounds a little bit corny, but
I love it.
yeah. It's also, you also get this question of do you see this person as a bigster? And I think it's that part that's a little bit hard to describe and get across, but it's like, are they going to fit into this culture? And I think that's what Biaka created, and the other partners together with Biaka continue to create. And then of course, yeah, I think the architecture side, for me, the what am I thinking of? The ski slope in Copenhagen, that project, to me personally, that is the true essence of what architecture is. Like you can turn a recycling factory into a ski slope that people can use, and it gets built. That's a huge thing, because a lot of people can come up with that idea, or maybe come up with that idea, but to actually get it built, that's a whole different ballgame.
Yeah.
And to me, I think that is what why you want to become an architect. That is the goal of every architect, to build this incredible world around us. And the idea that you can put a ski slope on top of a recycling center is an inspirational product in itself. So
Actually, that's one of my favorite projects. That basically mountain that you can play with it, and it's also a factory.
yeah,
And I think that, like Norman Foster said, as an architect, you design for the present with the awareness of the past for a future
yeah,
which is essentially unknown. And I think the big part of that is technology. And I would like to talk about that because technology and architecture are always connected. How do you
yeah.
see that in this the future in terms of that overlap? I would love if you can share with us, for you, what is the latest technology in architecture right now?
Yeah, so I get excited about technology in two different ways, or I see architecture and technology overlapping in two ways, and this applies for like my personal view and also within big, and that is one, the technology that we use as architects to design things. So things like computational design, BIM, 3D modeling, rendering, all these kind of things, right? Which enhances and allows us to design these amazing things, these amazing buildings. But then there's also the technology that actually influences design, right? So how will the automation of cars reshape our cities? How will vertical farming be integrated into our cities, or maybe even the suburban fabric? How will 3D printing is a technology that directly changes the typical typology of a house, right? And you can see that's one of the things we're working with Icon, for example, on Icon, our 3D printing company, for those of you who are unfamiliar with it. And we are building new homes here on Earth, but also the moon and Mars, which is pretty cool. So I cannot give you one technology I'm excited about, but I am super excited to be an architect in this period, because I think all the technologies you see that are available now or even on the horizon, I think, don't forget, we also, our industry as pure architects is also ripe for innovation, right? I
Yeah.
think the business model of architecture practice is something I'm really kind of questioning. And then when you zoom out a little bit more to the AEC industry and the construction industry, I keep saying this statistic, but is one of the few industries to actually decline in efficiency. So in the last like decade or so. So we're building slower now than we were a few years ago. And
Yeah,
buildings are getting more complicated, but the way that we build them is not really evolving at the same pace. So,
for sure.
and you can also see this in like these venture capitalist firms, and now from Silicon Valley are looking over and being like, hey, what's this building industry over there? It's like,
Yeah.
it's a huge industry, and there's not as much in it. There's still a huge room for improvement and room for disruption. And so I think it is a really exciting time. And whilst technology is not like the silver bullet, it's not the magic solution to solving problems in the architecture industry or the construction industry, I do think it is a huge piece of the puzzle. And for me, yeah, there's a combination of different things. Like 3D printing is exciting.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong. A few years ago, if you'd asked me about that, I would have been a bit more hesitant. Like, I don't see us 3D printing substantial buildings for a long time.
Yeah.
But then when you see companies like Icon 3D printing, Branch Technology, printing homes today or facade elements today, then you realize, okay, this is actually moving a bit faster than I thought.
Yes, and I think that the future of building is 3D printing, and at least not for the full building, but for a few elements that you can overlap into your building and make and create unique things. I saw in July, I saw a new that own studio and big basically invest in a Spain form that is a virtual workplace for architects
Oh
in real
yeah,
time, meetings, presentation platforms, developers, designers. Have you been involved in that? What do you think about that?
Yeah. So yeah, that's the kind of project that I would be involved in, have been involved in like from the technology side and trying to find out what projects we can use it on. So yeah, that's a collaboration with us, Squint Opera. I think UN Studio is also involved, and it started off as like a very grand vision of this this virtual environment that we could communicate over as architects. I think the idea kind of came around when, don't quote me on this, but like when Biaka was, or like the teams were working with Squint Opera, and you know, we were holding up a sketch onto the webcam as I'm doing now, and we thought there must be a better way for us to communicate architecture than this,
sure.
or like through, you know, when you think of, we spend all this time designing this 3D thing, this building in this virtual environment, whether it's Rhino, Grasshopper, Revit, SketchUp, whatever it is, it's a 3D environment. But then we communicate them through a flat screen, or like maybe at most the animation typically, or 2D images and renders and stuff like that. So virtual reality, I think, allows us as architects to create a higher bandwidth of communication. You can now try and get a sense of what it might be like to actually stand in that space, which I think is
that's the war, man. Imagine be like Star Wars with a guy just appearing next to you and you're talking to the guy.
and that's, I mean, like a lot of architects have a VR headset in their office now, and we can use tools like Enscape and just put it on. What Spaceform is like a more of a setup platform where you can kind of combine this Zoom meeting type environment, and you can also so you jump into this virtual meeting room. You can set up the room to look like your office's room, or like, you know, you can pin up materials, a little 3D model, and it's kind of centered around a table, which has this digital model on it, which you can animate and talk about. So you can present the model and sorry, not the model, the idea, your concept around a table like you would normally do. But then you can also click in and you're in the city, you're in the building, or whatever it is. And
that's amazing. You play with the scale of the things.
It's a platform where we can communicate as architects on a way higher bandwidth. In fact, we've used it on a few projects now, and especially, I didn't even talk about the new world that we live in of, you know, increased online interaction after the COVID, or we're still in the pandemic, I guess. We're still in this environment of working from home, and you know, you and I right now are interacting.
We are actually right now in a digital space. And actually, I would like to go into that, because I think that architecture is going into digital spaces, online communities. I think that are the future. For example, when we was talking about the Spaceform, for sure I will have to use it. It's like I work for Lava Laboratory for Visionary Architecture, and we are based in the different studios in the world. So basically, I have a very good connection with Sydney in Australia and Vietnam. And I never met these guys. I have a chat with them in Skype, and we chat a lot of, but it's very difficult, you know, interact with ideas and interact with clients in all the parts. And I think that online communities are the future, because we are getting into more these spaces of remote works, that basically you work for very remotely places, and you with that possibility, you get the possibility of getting a connection with clients in a very inside way, in a very deeply way, and to be actually, I don't know if called physical, or I don't know how to call it, but it's basically these digital spaces that you can interact into digital platforms. And Actually, even this podcast is a digital space when you discuss ideas, when you interact with architects. My idea with this podcast basically was having conversation with this about these topics that you are topics that you can find in architecture world, but more of that connection in online platforms that you can feel very deeply, and you can feel that
Yeah.
for the one that are listening can be with us talking about architecture stuff. And you
Yeah.
have a platform like this, right? That is called Architect Network. Can you talk me
Yeah.
about that?
The Architect Network. Yeah. We'll come back to the virtual worlds because there's stuff in there we'll go into. But yeah, I think I set up the Architect Network towards the beginning of this year for exactly the same reason, really. I felt that whilst I am a design technology specialist, I really just consider myself an architect that is very digitally fluent, right? And a tongue-in-cheek term for that I came up with was an architect, right? You're an
Yeah.
architect, but you also have that technology side. And
That is the first thing that I realized.
we've had it really mixed. Like some people love the name, some people hate it. They just don't get it.
Architect.
It's Architect Network. So
I love it.
and one of the reasons why I set it up was I could see technology has the good and bad. There's pros and cons of it in our industry. Like on one hand, I'm seeing all the good stuff of you can become a more informed architect. You can utilize the power of this guy in front of you or this thing in front of you, your computer, to help you create amazing architecture, right? But I can also see that there's a huge gap between university and practice, not only just in the technology side, in a lot of aspects, but specifically students are coming out and then they're often not really taught the programs they need to get into an architecture practice, or they're being taught stuff more from the animation world that's very experimental and is great. But when you get into a practice, they're like, I can't really use it unless you're incredible at it, but you might just become like a visualization person.
Yeah.
So there's this gap in university. There's a hugely slow adoption in the industry to adopt technology. Like we're still talking about whether to adopt BIM or specifically Revit. Revit is 20 years old. We're still discussing whether it's going to be the future or whatever. So, a lack of adoption, there's this growing gap between university and practice. And also, you can find a million videos on Biaka, Zaha, Foster, all this kind of stuff talking about design, but there's not that much conversation around technology in architecture. Yeah. So because of those things, I founded the Architect Network along with another colleague from Big, and we just started this by having podcasts exactly like this, but on Clubhouse, which is a new app. In fact, you should come join this Sunday. We're going to be
I would love to. 100%.
We're going to be talking about extraterrestrial architecture with Big's in-house space architect.
Man, that's my favorite topic. I gotta be there.
There you go. You can follow, if you look out on my Instagram or look up architect_network, you can see all of our latest talks and stuff like that. So we started with just having discussions on Clubhouse because it was super easy to get started. And in, I think, January or February when we started, it was like everyone was talking about Clubhouse. So we were like, this looks like a cool way to get this thing going. And then this weekend, like I'm in the process of, I've been recording, I'm becoming a YouTuber, which sounds really strange to say. It's like at 33 years old, it's like an early midlife crisis, right? I'm becoming a YouTuber, but I thought, the whole goal is to try and get conversations, learning resources to as many people as possible and make it as accessible as possible. Of course, it is going to be a business. So, we do need to generate a revenue to pay great people to come and teach and stuff like that. But initially, we're starting with these free talks, the YouTube channel where I'll be making videos on topics like what's the best software to learn coming out of university, what is Rhino Inside and what is computation, all these kind of things, which we'll be soon releasing on Architect Network on YouTube. And then the kind of third stage is an online platform where we'll be creating in-depth online courses, how, Rhino 101, Grasshopper 101, from people like myself. I mean, at the beginning, it will be mostly taught by me, from the perspective of working in practice for almost 10 years. So I'm not going to be teaching.
I am already excited. That sounds very cool. You should open a TikTok account.
Yeah, TikTok. I don't know if I'm ready for TikTok yet. It's already hard enough.
I will give you 1 year.
Oh man, yeah. If you ever see me doing dances on TikTok, then just delete me. Delete me. I'm already cringing at saying like and subscribe to my YouTube channel. Like, I'm that guy now. I'm that guy.
By the way, hey guys, subscribe.
Yeah, and subscribe to his channel and subscribe to both of them. Yeah.
Man,
but in a weird way, as a if I am a digitally fluent architect, this is the way that we communicate things, right? This is, if I want to make an impact in the industry through teaching, I could go and teach for the best university in the world. I could go and teach at Harvard or Columbia is literally down the street, but I'd only be teaching like, I don't know, 100, 200 people that are very privileged enough to go to university, and especially in the US where it's really expensive. Or I could go onto YouTube and potentially thousands of people could watch that video as long as they have an internet connection.
That's
who knows if anyone will actually watch it, but
oh no, for sure I will be watching. so you have one student. The thing is that I think that decentralization of education is a key of the future. We was talking that in the first episode with Mariana Cabugueira. We was talking about decentralization because I think that you know her. She worked with Zaha Hadid, and she has these online courses, and we was talking exactly the same thing, how the education need to evolve and be more accessible for all the world, not just for the people that go to universities civilly.
Especially now I live in America. I'm in New York right now, but university here is very expensive, and it's unfortunately it's become like a way for people to make a lot of money. And you can come out of university with a lot of debt and all this kind of stuff. And is it preparing you for the future you need? That depends what university you go to. But not that universities are a bad thing. It's still great to go to university.
Yes.
But we're seeing that you can supplement that education with online resources, or if you don't have accessibility to come to these places, these universities, you can still access it. Like, there's huge communities around the world. Like, there's a huge community in India that is really interested in architecture. And you could argue that those young architects in India, in a country that's like booming with people and like there's a growing middle class, they are going to have more effect on the world's, creating a sustainable future as architects than the West coming over there. So, if I can just teach a little bit about the technology side, just my little niche of architecture and technology, and talk about all these different things, AI, blockchain, computation, what are all these things, and why should we care as architects?
Man, that's amazing. And talking about that, what will you choose as the most essential tools in terms of programs of modeling and this kind of stuff for architects that should know at this moment in the era that we are?
So we could go through my basic outline. I would say, if you're a student, I would, of course, you want to have a good grasp of some 3D modeling platform, 3D modeling software that you would design in. And I would hazard based on my experience, those two things are either Rhino would be my number one, and SketchUp, although I'm not a huge SketchUp fan anymore, it is a very used piece of software. Of course, you've got more niche stuff like Maya and Blender and this kind of stuff, but Rhino and SketchUp are the two most common ones. I would recommend Rhino because I think it's the most versatile. You can do a lot of things in Rhino.
Yes.
Starting to learn a little bit of the computational side, so Grasshopper would also be my recommendation. A lot of the younger generation are already coding in some way. So if you're also learning to code, I think that's great, but just maybe understanding what Grasshopper is and maybe just playing around and understanding that is when you come out into university is super important. BIM, of course, I have to, as a BIM guy, I have to recommend, learning Revit, for example. Revit is still the most widely used BIM platform. It is not the greatest piece of software. Even though I use it every day, it can be very frustrating. But here's the other thing is a lot of firms do look for that skill set when hiring. So whilst I understand, we all want to be that design architect coming out of university and creating all these amazing ideas, having that skill set is also really important. And of course, there's visualization. There's this new era of real-time rendering, Enscape, Twinmotion, Luminon. One of those three is, either of those three is a great one to learn. Of course, you've then got Photoshop and InDesign and Illustrator and that kind of stuff. So I would, try and look into those things or understand what they are. Gravitate to the one that interests you the most. If you want to design, you want to be a designer, I would say focus on Rhino and Grasshopper, right? If you're maybe more interested in becoming a technical architect and detailing and things like that, Revit's going to be a great tool for you. If you're really into visualization or maybe animation, that's also great. And it's great to understand these. Go towards the one that interests you the most. And the one thing you can come out of university with is you can't come out of university with that much experience. Like, unfortunately, experience is experience. You can't buy it. It's just like you can do a few internships. Some places don't even count experience till after your master's or whatever, like postgraduate experience. But you can't really come out with that much experience from university. But you can come out with a little technology superpower. You could be a bit of a Grasshopper whiz. You could be a bit of a Revit whiz, although it's hard without having that experience in practice. You could come out as like an animation with like this animation superpower and be like, hey, I could come to your firm. Yeah, I could be a designer, I could be an architect, but I could also do these cool little animated diagrams for you. And it just gives you that little superpower that, someone else might not have. So I wouldn't get too, like, as a student, don't feel like, man, I need to learn all of these programs at once. Definitely understand what they are and what they're used for, right? Grasshopper is not just about creating crazy buildings. It can be used for a lot of other things. And gravitate to the one that interests you the most, I think.
Yes, I am. I think that in terms of programming, there is a huge gap, especially in Latin America academia, that students are not getting all those latest technologies. And I think that architecture is a career that we need to keep updating all days because we're going to stay behind. And I would like to talk about one philosophical topic. How do you see robots can replace architects in the future? Do you see that possible? And I will tell you one thing, that there is a project of Zaha Hadid that actually is a project with Prospera, and is the first step of using artificial intelligence into architecture. It's an online platform that this guy created and with Unreal Engine, and this is a platform that you basically design your condo or apartment or whatever, and this is creating the shape of the building, and that shape can go into other blocks to do a correlation into a whole community.
It's like Sims. You can build your own.
It's exactly like Sims, exactly like all these games, and it feels like a game. Do you see that in the future that artificial intelligence can replace architects?
So I agree with the statement that designing or architecture will become more and more influenced and more and more similar to video games. I'll come back to that in a second. But AI, I don't know if that project uses like that deeper AI. I think if they are using it, it's to solve problems, right? To solve conditions. But it's not like, I don't think anyway, it's like you hit, a lot of people think AI in architecture is like you hit a button and this computer designs the whole thing, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Especially the clients.
Yes, in theory, that could happen. Do I think it's going to take over architecture? No. But we do have to be wary of it, because whilst we're in our bubble of design, creating these like crazy buildings, there's other guys like the big tech companies that are making these tools, and developers are like, wow, I can just get rid of the architect and like hit this button or go on this website. And don't forget that, like, you know, the number of buildings that architects design is not that high. It's like, you know, I don't know what the exact number is, 10%, 1% of buildings around the world are actually designed by an architect.
Yeah.
But so I think it's more a case of like how AI will help us automate the things that we don't necessarily need to do. And that will create probably much smaller practices. Yes, I think some people will you know, maybe lose out jobs. Like look at an architecture practice back in the day, you'd see a warehouse, like a whole level of people drawing. Yes. Right? Now you see a cluster of 50 people around computers, yes, computing, like whatever. Is the next step that 50 people goes down to like 10, and we're doing the same amount of work whilst harnessing the use of computation, AI, and machine learning, these kind of things to streamline things like building code, whilst I'm designing, you know, this AI plugin to Rhino or Revit or whatever is telling you, hey, it's like Mr. Clippy. Do you remember Clippy from
yes,
from Word that was like, hey, yes, are you making a CV? It could be the same thing, like, you know, your door's too small or something like that. And because of that, you don't need as many people checking your drawings and all that kind of stuff. So I'm less, whilst it is possible, look, you can create a program that reads a brief, picks out keywords. Yes. You go online, and what do we do as architects? We go online, we take inspiration from images, we go and work for firms like big, and we learn from those people about design sensibilities. That can all be taught. That's called machine learning. And then you have a problem. You have this series of parameters that the site, the budget, context, and you stitch them together to create a solution. Now, I think it would take a very long time for that solution to be compelling. For, you know, as a, you know, how do you add that human-centric element to it? In the same way, we also really applaud anyone that thinks uniquely or outside of the box, and a computer would think incredibly uniquely, like no one we've seen before. So they could be a genius, or it could be like a horrible blob of stuff. So I'm not as, like, you know, pessimistic that the AI is coming and we're all going to lose our jobs. I think it's more like automating out the stuff that we don't need to do, so that we can concentrate on where we do add value, which is creative problem solving. But I do also see that maybe this would, not necessarily AI, I guess, but technology will also allow us to expand beyond what we typically do now, and maybe reconnect with the act of construction. So rather, yes, we may lose, or maybe not, I wouldn't say we won't lose it, but like I could start a firm tomorrow that's maybe smaller, a group of people that are very architects, that are very like skilled, but, and so I'm not hiring as many people, but instead of just designing things and here's a bunch of drawings to some contractor, I can actually plug my computer into a machine and hit print, and then that thing starts building, right? So
I see it as a tool, and I am a big fan of technology, but I see it that our first tool is our hand, and how we can sketch through how we can create this process that through your mind pass to your soul, and that to your hand, and that
Yeah.
from a sketch, and at the end that's a tool, but and I see technology as a tool to create unique things, but the most valuable thing that you can bring to the table is you. How is your idea changing? How is your perspective about the things? How is your perception about the reality? And all those kind of interceptions, and all those kind of unique things that make you special is
Yeah.
what you are bringing to the table to bring value into this new process of creation.
And I do agree, and I think that's what I'm excited about in the future is like instead of huge architecture firms where 800 people work for ACOM or IDAS or whatever, what we'll see is maybe more smaller architects that are able to do big projects, but will have more variation in the market. So there'll be many little big firms that can do these things, which will make a more interesting environment around us. We'll have loads of different buildings from different small architecture firms. I did have a point. I've totally forgotten it now, but yeah, no, I think it's not so much about that we're gonna. I think architecture firms will get smaller, but we as architects will get more teched up.
Yeah,
and
architects.
Architects. It will present new opportunities for us. But here's the point I was going to make. I do agree with you that many of the tools that we use today many of the technologies are tools, right? Rhino is a tool, Revit is a tool, and all this kind of stuff. But there is a moment where your computer or whatever it is you're using goes beyond just a tool, right? And that's particularly when you get into the world of maybe even Grasshopper. If you create a script that populates the building for you, are you now a collaborator? Is your computer now a collaborator? And here's the interesting thing. What if you get to a generative design where it's still very humanly connected, right? Even though with generative design, the computer's processing a lot of information for you, you still come up with that process, but you are not able to come up with that solution without your computer, right? Or without your script, or without whatever you're using. So is your computer now becoming a collaborator, right? So now, I think Greg Lynn once said that it was like 51% him, 49% his computer. if I hire an intern, right, and I ask them to make some, let's think of something like to model this sketch for me, exactly, just model it and work it out. Or I create a script that does the exact same thing. You would say the intern is a collaborator, but you say that the computer is a tool. So just as a fun debate, at what point does your computer can become a collaborator? I do agree that most architects use your computer, your software, whatever, as a tool, but there is a point where it can become a collaborator.
That's a good topic for your channel. Is is computer a collaborator or a tool?
Yeah, that's a great one. We should have that. Computer, collaborator or tool? Friend or foe?
Man, we are getting into the final question to the show, and I will love. I was ready to talk about moon and all those kind of things, but I will leave it for all the people that are interested in that architecture. Go to your channel and hear about it. But I would like to ask you one thing. The dream is getting real, right? Like we are designing in other planets. That's amazing. Will you live in Mars? If you have the opportunity, will you do it?
I mean, right now I would say yes. I signed up for the moon project thing, so I guess I've kind of got a part of it. But who knows? Yeah, of course that's tempting for me. I'm an architect, but I'm also a traveler, right? I left the UK almost 10 years ago now. I love traveling, exploring. my dad and his granddad were like part of the Navy, so we have that kind of nautical adventurous side. But the reality is, I guess I don't know what age I would be when I could go to the moon, to Mars, for example. It would be hard to do that, knowing that when Elon Musk says the first few people that are going have got a very low chance of surviving.
Hey, thank you for being positive.
Yeah, but I mean, I would definitely be tempted to it. Yeah, and hope, I think in my lifetime, like going to the moon for a quick holiday or something would be possible, or will be possible, which is super exciting. You think of, my grandparents, they lived in Hong Kong for a bit when I didn't even exist. My mom and dad didn't even exist. But they moved to Hong Kong. My mom was actually born in Hong Kong. And when they got there by boat, right? So imagine going from Liverpool to Hong Kong on a boat, which is a long way. And my mom was born there. And then, I think it was 50 years later, I got one of my first jobs and moved out there. I flew out there on a plane. I was out there in 10, 11 hours, whatever it was. So, what are my kids or my grandkids, are they going to get to Hong Kong via the, what's it called, SpaceX hop, where they'll be there in half an hour?
Teletransportation.
Yeah. Or some Hyperloop that goes all the way around the world. That might be a bit far for the Hyperloop, but or will they be having a cheeky weekend on the moon?
Yes.
It'd probably be a bit expensive still, but equally though.
Yeah, let's dream about it. At the end, I think that it will be possible, and we're gonna live that time. And I agree with you what you said at the beginning. It's amazing be an architect at this time. I agree with that. It's absolutely amazing. And
it would be great to be the first architects on
the
Mars.
architect
would be
sure.
be tempting. Unfortunately,
let's open a studio there.
Yeah. Unfortunately, the kid that flew up with Jeff Bezos and kind of went into space, he's also called Oliver, so he's already the first Oliver in space, I think. So he's already taken that. We'll wait for the first architect. We'll see who it is. But yeah, I mean, it's very tempting, but we'll see. Who knows when it will happen?
It's a game, And for the final question, it's a stole question from Tim Ferriss podcast, and it's about the billboard question. If you have the possibility to put an image, sound, and the slogan or video, whatever you want, in all the billboards in the world for one day, what it will be?
Ooh, that's it. So you can put anything on the billboards.
Anything.
Wow. My initial reaction would just be, don't be an asshole. Try not to be an asshole. That's
and with a smile face.
Yeah.
Please.
Actually, okay, here's one I saw on someone graffitied somewhere on a construction wall, and it was just simply, are you helping or are you hurting? And I think that's a really nice, that's what I wouldn't go with the asshole thing. I would go with that one. Are you helping or are you hurting? I think that would be a simple way, because I think you have to question. We do live in a world where I think the UN just came out this week saying that we're kind of almost past we've got the warning flag that the environment is getting to a point of no return. Is what you're doing truly helping, or is it hurting right now? Especially when you look at how many intelligent people are being absorbed by the finance industry, the law industry, and not that these things are super evil, but they could be going to work for firms where you're actually making a huge difference in the world. So yeah, that's what I'll go with. The are you helping or are you hurting?
I love it, man. I love it. Hey, Olly, it was a pleasure to talk with you. I spent a really good time talking with you. And for all that are listening, please go to Olly Instagram, Olly channels. He is now almost a YouTuber, so support him. And the one that are not subscribed to this podcast, come on. If you come to this end, we are almost friends. So let's join to the community. Thank you very much for listening.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Make sure to like and subscribe to this channel as well. And no, it's great. I'm really enjoying your podcast. I'm excited to see your channel continue to grow. We'll do another one when you get to like and next time you'll have thousands of subscribers, I'm sure.
Bye-bye.